Hi everybody, this is Todd Oltoff from toddoltoff.com coming back at you with another screencast. And this week we're going to take a look at converting your photos out of Aperture. Apple a couple weeks ago announced that it is going to be discontinuing the development of Aperture and iPhoto and moving towards their Photos application. And for some photographers or even casual home photographers, there's concern about what's next. So what do I do with my photos? Can I get them out of Aperture? Can I move them if I want to? For some people, they're moving to Lightroom and checking that out. For others, there's just the concern that if the iPhoto and Aperture go away, then is it going to be easy for me to get my stuff out of Aperture? So what I thought I'd do this week is show you an option that you can use to move away from Aperture and move your photos to a place where you can use them in any application you choose. And that hopefully will help you help kind of ease the anxiety about it and also help you get set up for the future. So here I am in an Aperture library that I've got. This is just one that I have here, and you'll notice in here I've got various things that I've done to these photos. As you can see, I've got tags. I've got tags on there. I've got metadata. I've got adjustments. That's what that other little marking means there. I've got flags. Some of them are adjusted. Some of them aren't. So I've got all these different photos here that I want to get out, and I've also spent some time putting them in a folder structure and a hierarchy. And so there are ways that I could do this within Aperture, but it would take me a while to do it. I'd have to go up, I'd have to export them. Right now I have these inside an Aperture library. I don't have them as reference masters, so I'd have to go through and export those and then try to capture some of the metadata, and it would be a multi-step process to get some of these things out. Well, luckily somebody out there has created a Aperture exporter, and let me just pull that up here. You can see it's an Aperture exporter that has been put together, and basically it takes care of the whole migration for you, and it sets you up for success. And so I've got all of the different information that you can see right here on the website. Now recently what they've done, it was in beta, and now it's available at the Mac App Store, and I believe it's $14.99 if you want to pay for it and download it. And it'll take care of all the migration for you. What I would recommend is just trying it out first. It does have a trial, so the first time you run it, it'll run in demo mode, and it just restricts the number of images that are exported into each folder. So it basically just gives you a feel for whether or not it works or not, and that's probably the best way to test it out. So what I'm going to do is download it from here and basically install it, and then we'll walk through the process just to see how this works. So now that it's downloaded, it's in a zip folder here. I'm just going to pull up the Finder. Let me put the website down here. Pull up the Finder, and let's go ahead and open that zip file. And here's the application, which we can then just move over to the Applications folder. And so here's the Aperture exporter, and let's launch it for the first time. And let me just put this down here. We're going to open it up. And so this is the Aperture exporter, and as you can see, it's running in demo mode, and so it's only going to export a maximum of 10 master original images per folder. And so that just kind of gives you a feel for how this works. Again, the restrictions removed if you choose to buy the actual program. So I'm just going to say not now. Just so we can check this out. Now what I would recommend before you use this is that if you've got a large Aperture library, that you first go in and export your library or a portion of your library so you can test it on this. Now when you split your library apart, it doesn't actually remove those photos from your Aperture library, but rather it just creates a new library for them. So like if, for example, if I was to select this right here and I just control clicked on there, you can see that it's got the export option, export as, and then you can say project is new library. And then Aperture will generate a new library of that particular project. And that's what I did to get this project here split out from all the other photos I had for 2013. They're all here in the folder hierarchy. So you can move the originals and everything over into that library. It's making a copy of it, and it keeps your original Aperture library intact. So this is a good way to experiment with it. It's low risk other than you're using hard drive space because you've got duplicates now of some of these photos. But I'd start with a lower number of photos just to give it a test. Let me just pull this back up here. So this is the exporter, and basically what it does, it tells me my current library and how many photos I've got in there. So I've got 468. So obviously I'm only going to be able to bring 10 over with the restrictions I have on it. Estimated number of folders is 4, which it's counting from here, the different folders that I've got. And now basically it tells you it's going to generate files for your originals without adjustments. And that means that normally when you export, your adjustments don't follow. But with this particular exporter, it will actually take your Aperture adjustments and bake them in if you want to do that. And it basically is just going to convert your photos over to JPEG or whatever you choose. So if you got RAW files, it's obviously not going to bake in the changes to the RAW files. But actually, that's probably okay because you've probably already done the adjustments and you're fine with that. So here are the processing options you've got. You can image naming profile. You can use the current version name, or if you want to, you can create your own name. You know, name with index. You can create a custom name there and have that set up. It's up to you. I'm just going to use the current version name. Hopefully, you've done all your naming and everything inside your Aperture library, which makes it a lot easier to do. Now I've got this choice here where I can create a JPEG for adjusted images. And I can set what those are rated between. So I have a choice between JPEG or TIFF. And so depending on how you've done your adjustments, if you feel like you want to do more adjustments to those photos, you may want to export them as TIFF. The difference between JPEG and TIFF, TIFF's going to be a lot bigger file size. It may be the difference between, let's say, 15 megabytes and 2 megabytes on the high side. So it's up to you on what you want to do with that. For our purposes, I'm just going to create a JPEG, and it says for adjusted images rated between. And so it allows you to limit it by rating, because most times we really mainly only care about the adjustments we do to the images that are rated 5 stars. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go from here on 1 star, or let's say no stars, all the way up to 5 stars. And that way I've covered just basically everything that I've got in my library I've got covered. You can adjust the JPEG quality here to whatever size you want. I'm going to leave it at the default because that's probably a pretty good setting there. Now I've also got the option to create folders for albums and smart albums. So do I want to create a folder for this album I've set up? You see here I've set up an album in my Aperture library inside this project of ones that are my favorites. And so it's giving me the option to create a folder for that. So I'm going to do that because I want to see how the whole thing works. And that's pretty much it. That's the entire setup. And then you just click Begin Export. So I'm going to click that and let's give it a try. It's going to ask me where I want to save that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to save it on the desktop so we can see it. I'm going to say Open. And then it starts working, and you can see the export happening down here. And you can see on here it's giving us, kind of blow by blow an idea of what's going on with the export. And it'll just keep churning away to export those things. And so it's still exporting them. So when it's done exporting the different files with the adjustments and everything, then I'll come back and show you what it looks like. You can see here it's estimating about 17 minutes to do all of that. We'll see where it goes from there, and I'll come back and show you the output. Okay, the export is complete. You can see I'm back to the demo mode of the exporter here. I have my folder over here of 2013. Let me just put this down so we can see here. Now you'll notice none of my photos have been touched. Everything is still here. Right inside my folder, all my information's here. Everything's just like it was, so it didn't change anything inside Aperture. But let's take a look and see what happened with the export. So let me just put Aperture down here for a minute, and let's just pull up a Finder window for the folder. And so here we are inside the Vacation folder here. So I'm in 2013, Vacation, Mono Lake, set up just like I had the hierarchy set up in Aperture. And what it did here is you notice that it also put a Mono Lake folder. This is for my albums right here. So the album I had, here are the different pictures in the album, and then here are all the other pictures that I had just inside the Mono Lake folder. Now you'll notice that for each of these things, they're just a little bit different. You'll notice that I've got, let me just expand this and bring this over here. You'll notice that I've got basically pictures that say with adjustments. These are the ones that had Aperture adjustments that got baked into the image. The ones that I said, hey, anything that's got an adjustment, I want you to make a JPEG out of it. That's what these are right here. Then I've got some of my original files right here. I've got some TIFFs in here. You can see I've got some raw files, so it didn't change those at all. But you'll notice that it also added XMP sidecar files with it, and that's what holds all of your metadata. And so that makes it easily transferable then to different programs like Lightroom and things like that, because it can read those XMP sidecars and actually attach all of that metadata to the files themselves. In fact, let me show you how that reads. Let's just pull up this photo for a minute. This is an interesting photo. Let me just shrink this down so we've got it in the middle, and I'll just put this down. So here we are. This is one of the photos with the baked-in adjustments, and so let's just see how it did with the metadata. So I'm in preview right now. So I'm going to go to the inspector, and so here's the inspector for this photo with all my info on it. Now if I go to the eye here, you'll notice that here's all the general information about my picture, but here's the EXIF information. All of that is there, just like it is in Aperture. Even the GPS information for where I took the shot. There's my IPTC information. I've got right here the different information on the file. There's my TIFF information. Here's the other thing that's interesting. If I pull this up, here are all of my keywords that I put into Aperture. All of those are now with the file put right here, right inside the keyword section of the photo itself. So as you can see, all of that information, all of that work that I did actually transferred over right into this file. And so everything's right there. So it's a pretty good application, that Aperture Exporter, or Exporter for Aperture. Does a really nice job of taking all of your photos, moving them right out of Aperture, keeping all of your folder structures, your hierarchies in place so you don't have to change them, and also just making sure that any adjustments and things that you made at least get baked into the photos so you've got those right there for you, and you don't have to worry about losing those adjustments. So that's all I have for this week. I wanted to give kind of a quick overview on how to get some of your information out of Aperture. In a future screencast, I'll show you how to actually take that information then and import them into programs like Lightroom, for instance. We'll probably use that, and maybe make some comparisons between Lightroom and Aperture to see how close they are and whether that might be a transition that you could make. So that's all I have for this week. I'll be back at you next week with another screencast to help you learn how to do more things with your Mac.